by the power of Grayskull.
When He-Man and the Masters of the Universe hit TV screens in 1983, it wasn't just another cartoon, it was a cultural phenomenon. We all know the moment. A shirtless, glowing Prince Adam holds up his sword, lightning strikes, and he shouts, "I have the power!" But let me ask you something. Have you ever actually thought about what that means? Because once you see what's really going on behind this phrase, the symbolism, the origins, the hidden messages, you'll never look at He-Man the same way again. Some say it's a simple power-up. Others, they see a bold metaphor for puberty, masculinity, even repressed identity. Stay till the end to uncover the jaw-dropping connection between He-Man's battle cry and a real-life barbarian legend, and the one hidden detail in that transformation that almost got this show banned. Yeah, get ready, because we're about to break it all down.
I hope the rest of you will leave the moon in peace.
Forget it, He-Man!
When He-Man and the Masters of the Universe hit TV screens in 1983, the creators weren't just making a cartoon. They were building a brand, a movement, a half-hour commercial with mythological vibes and muscles on muscles. And right at the center of it all, I have the power! The phrase wasn't just catchy, it was intentional. It was designed to make kids feel strong, like they had the power, like they could conquer anything, just like He-Man. But if you look closer, according to some of the fan theories, it sounds more like a declaration of self-realization. A boy becomes a man, a prince becomes a warrior. He claims his strength out loud, like a spell or a rite of passage. And let's not pretend we didn't notice how it felt. Kind of sexual. The scream, the flex, the glowing sword, it was never just about fighting Skeletor.
I win, He-Man! Your sorceress is trapped inside the Dragon Pearl. Her power is now mine! Yes!
So who actually came up with the phrase, "I have the power"? It wasn't some ancient battle cry or a line pulled from a comic book. It was the invention of one man, writer Michael Halperin, who helped shape the mythology behind He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, back when Mattel needed a story to go with their toy line. Halperin was brought in to create the lore of Eternia, Castle Grayskull, and Prince Adam. He needed a way for Adam to transform, not just physically, but emotionally into He-Man. The key was a phrase that felt like a magical trigger. It had to be short, dramatic, and sound like something that could hypnotize kids into screaming it during playtime, or shouting it in the mirror like a superhero mantra. That's where "I have the power" came in. According to Halperin, he wanted something that sounded mythic, but also personal. Unlike the power of Grayskull, which implies outside magic, "I have the power" is about internal empowerment. That's why it hits so hard. It wasn't just about muscles and swords, it was about owning your strength. That single line, "I have the power," went on to define the show, the toy line, and the generation of kids who suddenly believed they could conquer anything, as long as they shouted it loud enough. Let's talk about the transformation. Prince Adam, this gentle, soft-spoken guy in a pink vest and tight white pants, raises a mystical sword and suddenly explodes into a bronzed, muscle-bound, nearly naked warrior. It's loud, it's dramatic, and I'm sure some kids and parents thought it's kinda hot. Every single time he yells the same thing, "I have the power," and bam, we got abs, pecs, biceps, and a loincloth that leaves nothing to the imagination. Think about it. It's the most theatrical puberty metaphor ever animated. One second he's a soft boy, the next he's the physical embodiment of hypermasculinity. The message? This is what power looks like. This is what a man looks like. And let's be honest, it wasn't just empowering, it was strangely erotic. The sparkles, the glow, the thunder, and all the moaning intensity in the delivery. There's a reason why so many people grew up with strange feelings about He-Man. The transformation was doing a lot. Here's where things get even more interesting. He-Man wasn't originally a brand new idea. In fact, in the early 1980s, Mattel originally wanted to create an action figure line based on Conan the Barbarian. Yes, that Conan. The one played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. The one with all the violence, blood, and half-naked sorceresses. When Mattel heard Dino De Laurentiis was producing a Conan the Barbarian movie, they jumped on board and secured the toy license. The plan? Make Conan figures. Ride the hype. Then the movie came out, and it was absolutely not for kids. Beheadings, orgies, witch and muscles everywhere.
To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women.
Mattel panicked. They couldn't associate their wholesome toy brand with that level of brutality and sex appeal. So what did they do? They pivoted. They took the barbarian body, the sword, the fantasy world, the muscles, and they sanitized it. Gave him a prince alter ego, replaced blood with lasers, and they gave him a trusty tiger. And here's where it gets even more suspicious. The earliest prototypes of He-Man figures looked exactly like Conan. Same harness, same grim facial expression, same axe and sword combo. They even reused some of the exact mold features. And the legal drama? Oh, it happened. The Conan movies production company actually sued Mattel for ripping off their intellectual property, and Mattel's defense was basically, whoa, this is a totally original character. His name is He-Man, totally different guy. The case got messy, but eventually it settled out of court. So technically, He-Man isn't Conan, but let's be real, he kind of is. Even in the tone of the show, you can see the Conan DNA peeking through. Think about Skeletor. He's like a PG version of Thulsa Doom. The setting of Eternia is basically a brighter, shinier version of the Hyborian Age. And then there's the sword. Both wield swords that aren't just weapons, they're symbols of destiny, strength, and dominance. Even the pose He-Man strikes while lifting the sword overhead, it's a near copy of Conan's famous poster pose. Muscle-bound, chest out, weapon in the air, framed in lightning or flame. So yeah, He-Man is what you'd get if you'd ask the Saturday morning cartoon department to sanitize Conan the Barbarian with 3 cups of glitter and a dash of moral lesson. But those primal roots, they never really went away. Here's a fun fact. In the 1982 Conan movie, there's a very specific line that sounds an awful lot like He-Man's battle cry. Conan yells, "I am the law," and honestly, it's hard to ignore the parallels between the two. Over the years, fans haven't just accepted "I have the power" as a catchphrase, they've interpreted it. One theory says that Prince Adam is a metaphor for a closeted identity, soft-spoken, sensitive, flamboyant, and hiding a powerful truth.
Sorry, old cat, but he could stay on Tila's trail better than you could.
By the power of Grayskull!
When he finally declares, "I have the power," he isn't just transforming physically, he's claiming who he really is. Boldly, publicly. Another theory connects the phrase to sexual awakening. "I have the power" becomes a metaphor for bodily autonomy, taking control, asserting masculinity, stepping into adulthood. There's also the duality. Prince Adam is pink, gentle, and nurturing. He-Man is tan, dominant, forceful. It's a classic case of identity split, and fans have eaten that symbol alive. Many fans saw He-Man as a coded icon, a character who had to hide his true self, until he raised that sword and finally, unapologetically, became who he really was. Whether intentional or not, that message resonated. And here's the thing, the people behind He-Man, they weren't totally oblivious to all of this. Over the years, some of the writers and voice actors admitted, yeah, the transformation scene was a little suggestive. The outfits, the posing, the glowing sword, they were aware that it all walked a fine line between heroic and homoerotic. And frankly, they leaned into it. He-Man was campy, it was dramatic, it was extra, and that was part of the charm. No one really sat down and said, let's make this sexually charged. But they weren't trying that hard to avoid it either. You might think "I have the power" was just a catchphrase shouted by a cartoon hero in fuzzy briefs. But in the 80s and 90s, that line escaped the screen and became a rally cry for real people chasing fame, strength, and success. Athletes, bodybuilders, musicians, they loved this line. Arnold Schwarzenegger, who ironically inspired He-Man through Conan, was known to reference power constantly in his speeches. He even joked that he had the power during bodybuilding contests, a not-so-subtle wink at his animated counterpart. Sylvester Stallone during Rocky III and IV era was also seen quoting the phrase backstage. He-Man's influence was everywhere in gym culture. It was the ultimate masculine mantra.
Well, will you look at me? I have the power!
Even MC Hammer sampled the phrase in his stage shows, and in 1990, he literally released a track called You Can't Touch This, which had He-Man level swagger backed into every beat. And get this, MTV once ran a He-Man Power Hour where pop stars talked about how cartoons like He-Man made them feel unstoppable as kids. And for the ladies, Madonna, who launched her Express Yourself movement in the late 80s, once referenced He-Man during a backstage interview saying, "We all need to feel like we have the power." It wasn't ironic, it was the cultural truth of the time. Kids growing up in the 80s didn't just watch He-Man, they absorbed him. The catchphrase became something to yell before you scored a touchdown, landed a trick on your skateboard, or told your school bully to back off. It wasn't just animation, it was affirmation. So whether you were flexing at the gym or grabbing a mic on stage, saying "I have the power" in the 80s and 90s was a way of declaring "I'm ready, I'm bold, I'm bigger than this moment." Let me know in the comments if you have ever used that catchphrase yourself as a kid or as an adult. No judgment here. So yeah, "I have the power" was never just a line. It was a mantra, a metaphor, a complete declaration of identity, masculinity, and transformation. And whether you saw He-Man as a childhood hero, a muscle-bound icon, or something that just made you feel something you couldn't explain, you're definitely not alone. Now the only question remaining is, who else from our childhoods was hiding a double meaning? Because if you thought He-Man was wild, wait till you see our next video. Make sure to like this video, smash that subscribe button, and ring the bell for alerts. As always, stay campy.